In the quiet suburban town of Greenville, South Carolina, the Rivera family was seen as a pillar of the community. Their two-story home, with its white picket fence and manicured lawn, seemed to encapsulate the idyllic American dream. Elena Rivera, a 32-year-old wife and mother of two, embodied the image of a devoted homemaker. She spent her days cooking meals, tidying the house, and caring for their children, Sophia, 8, and Lucas, 5, while also looking after her aging mother-in-law, Teresa. Her husband, Rafael Rivera, was a hard-working contractor who ran a small construction company. At 34, Rafael was admired for his reliability and dedication. He worked tirelessly to provide for his family, often putting in long hours and rarely taking time to appreciate the life he had built with Elena. To outsiders, the Riveras were the perfect family. But behind closed doors, cracks were beginning to form, unseen by everyone except Elena. Elena had once loved this life. When she and Rafael first married, she found joy in making their house a home, in being the glue that held their family together. But over the years, the sparkle had faded. Her days had grown monotonous, each one blending into the next. The constant demands of motherhood, coupled with Teresa's unrelenting critiques, left Elena feeling drained. Her sacrifices often went unnoticed, and Rafael, though kind, seemed oblivious to her emotional needs. Every evening, when Rafael returned home from work, he would kiss her on the cheek, exchange a few pleasantries, and retreat to his laptop to handle business emails. His affection had become routine, devoid of the passion and attention Elena craved. She felt invisible, her existence reduced to fulfilling everyone else's needs while her own desires and ambitions withered in the background. Late at night, lying in bed next to a husband who had fallen asleep from exhaustion, Elena would stare at the ceiling, her mind drifting to the question she feared most: is this all there is? One evening in September 2023, as Elena scrolled through Facebook while waiting for Lucas to fall asleep, a notification popped up. A friend request from someone named Daniel Cruz. The profile picture showed a tall, confident man in a tailored suit, standing against the backdrop of the Dallas skyline. Curious, she clicked on his profile. His timeline was filled with photos of expensive cars, exotic vacations, and lavish dinners. Daniel's life looked exciting and sophisticated, the polar opposite of her own. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the accept button. Why would someone like him send me a friend request? She wondered. A small voice in her head warned her to ignore it, but another voice, the one that had grown louder over the years, urged her to see where it might lead. She accepted. Moments later, a message arrived. Hello, Elena. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your profile picture caught my eye. You have a truly warm and radiant smile. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She glanced at the photo he mentioned. It was from a family picnic 2 years ago. Rafael had taken it, though at the time, he barely complimented her. For a moment, she hesitated. Responding felt wrong, but the compliment lingered in her mind, filling a void she hadn't realized was so deep. Against her better judgment, she replied. Thank you, Daniel. That's kind of you to say. The messages came more frequently over the following days. Daniel was charming, attentive, and surprisingly easy to talk to. He asked about her day, her hobbies, and her dreams, questions Rafael hadn't asked in years. His words painted a picture of a life filled with excitement and romance, far removed from the endless cycle of chores and responsibilities that defined Elena's existence. At first, their conversations were casual, but soon they grew more personal. Daniel spoke of his life in Dallas, his business ventures, and his love for travel. He listened intently when Elena spoke of her frustrations, validating feelings she had buried for so long. You deserve so much more, Elena, he wrote one evening. You're intelligent, beautiful, and strong. It's a shame your husband doesn't see how lucky he is. Elena felt a mixture of guilt and exhilaration. She knew deep down that what she was doing was wrong, but Daniel's words were intoxicating. He made her feel seen, cherished, even adored. She found herself looking forward to his messages, her heart racing each time her phone buzzed. By October, Raphael began to notice subtle changes in Elena's behavior. She seemed more distracted, often glancing at her phone with a faint smile. She stayed up later than usual, claiming to be catching up with friends online. Raphael, preoccupied with work, dismissed his concerns as paranoia. But the distance between them grew, and Raphael couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Elena, on the other hand, was too consumed by her conversations with Daniel to notice Raphael's growing unease. Every message, every compliment from Daniel felt like an escape from the mundanity of her reality. For the first time in years, Elena felt alive. But she had no idea that this newfound thrill would soon unravel her entire world. Elena's heart raced as she stared at her phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dim light of her bedroom. Daniel Cruz had just sent another message. "I can tell you have a beautiful soul, Elena. There's something about you, something special. It's rare to find someone so genuine." The words made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't felt in years. Raphael was snoring softly beside her, oblivious to the storm brewing in his wife's heart. Elena knew she should stop. Each message from Daniel was pulling her further into something she couldn't quite name, something thrilling but dangerous. But the truth was, she didn't want to stop. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. She felt alive. Daniel Cruz was everything Raphael was not, or at least, that's how it seemed through their conversations. Over the next few weeks, Daniel's charm deepened. He was attentive, always asking how her day had gone, what her dreams were, what made her happy. "If you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be?" he asked her one evening. "I don't know," Elena replied hesitantly. "I've never really thought about it." "Then think about it now," Daniel urged her. "You deserve to see the world, Elena. You deserve so much more than staying in one place, day after day, being taken for granted." His words struck a chord. No one had ever told her she deserved more. Certainly not Raphael, who, despite his hard work and good intentions, had grown complacent in their marriage. Daniel, on the other hand, made her feel extraordinary. He made her dream again. Daniel painted a picture of a life she had never imagined. He described his world in Dallas, the bustling streets, the fine dining, the excitement of big city life. He sent her photos of himself at luxurious rooftop restaurants, standing next to sleek cars, and sipping cocktails with panoramic views of the city skyline. It was intoxicating, this glimpse into a life so different from her own. At first, Elena tried to convince herself that their connection was harmless. "It's just a conversation," she thought. "There's nothing wrong with that." But the lines blurred quickly. Their messages grew more frequent, more intimate. Late-night texting turned into early morning greetings. Daniel began calling her "mi alma," my soul, and "mi reina," my queen. Elena felt her heart swell with each new term of endearment. One evening, Daniel sent her a voice message. His voice was smooth, low, and confident, with a slight accent that made her cheeks flush. Hearing him speak her name felt like stepping into a fantasy. "Elena, I hope you know how incredible you are. You deserve to be adored every day. You deserve someone who makes you feel alive." Her thumb hovered over the play button, listening to it again and again. She knew she shouldn't, but it was irresistible. For the first time in years, she felt desired. When Daniel suggested a video call, Elena hesitated. It felt too personal, too real. But Daniel reassured her, as he always did. "I just want to see your smile, Elena. That's all." She agreed. And when the screen lit up with his face, chiseled jawline, warm brown eyes, a confident smile, her breath caught in her throat. He was even more handsome than his photos. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice soft and genuine. Elena blushed, feeling a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. For a moment, she forgot everything: Raphael, the children, the house. It was just her and Daniel in that moment, connected by a screen but closer than she'd ever felt to anyone. The more time Elena spent talking to Daniel, the more distant she became from Raphael. She began finding excuses to avoid spending evenings together, claiming she needed to catch up with friends or run errands. She stayed up late, her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for Daniel's messages. Each buzz of her phone brought a flutter of excitement. But with the thrill came guilt. Late at night, after the calls and texts had ended, Elena would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She loved Raphael, didn't she? He was a good man, a good father. He didn't deserve this. But then, Daniel's words would echo in her mind. "You deserve to feel alive." It was a mantra she clung to, justifying her actions as a way to reclaim something she had lost. Daniel's words became more persuasive as their relationship deepened. He started suggesting things, small at first, then bolder. "You should come to Dallas," he said one evening. "Just for a weekend. I'll show you what life could be like. A life filled with excitement, with love, with passion." Elena's heart raced at the thought. The idea of meeting him in person was both terrifying and exhilarating. She wanted to see him, to feel the connection they had built. But the risks were enormous. She could never explain such a trip to Raphael, or to herself. "I can't," she replied. "Why not?" Daniel asked. "Don't you want to feel free, Elena? Don't you want to know what it's like to live without limits, without fear?" His words planted a seed in her mind. For days, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Meeting Daniel felt dangerous, but also inevitable. He had awakened something inside her, a longing she couldn't suppress. As Elena grew closer to Daniel, the lies began. She told Raphael she was reconnecting with old friends online, that she needed time to herself. Raphael, exhausted from work and oblivious to the truth, didn't press her. But he noticed the changes. Elena, who used to greet him warmly when he came home, now barely looked up from her phone. She laughed softly at messages he couldn't see and spent hours in the bedroom with the door closed. Raphael's unease grew, but he couldn't bring himself to confront her. Elena, meanwhile, was slipping further into Daniel's world. She imagined what it would be like to leave Greenville behind, to escape the monotony of her life and step into the dazzling, vibrant life Daniel had promised. She didn't realize that the door she was opening would soon lead to devastation. Rafael Rivera sat in his truck in the driveway of his Greenville home, the engine still humming softly. The day had been long, grueling even, filled with managing workers and handling difficult clients. Yet, despite the physical exhaustion, his mind was elsewhere. Something had been gnawing at him for weeks, a feeling he couldn't shake. Elena was different, distant in ways he couldn't quite articulate. He clenched the steering wheel, the memory of her recent behavior flashing through his mind. When he finally entered the house, the smell of dinner greeted him. Elena was in the kitchen, her back to him, stirring a pot. On the surface, everything appeared normal. But Raphael couldn't help but notice how her movements were rushed, almost mechanical. "Hey, honey," he said, his voice warm but cautious. She turned briefly, offering him a quick smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes," she said, turning back to the stove. Raphael sighed and set his keys down on the counter. This wasn't the Elena he knew. The woman who once greeted him with a kiss, eager to hear about his day, now barely looked at him. The small changes were adding up, and Raphael was no longer sure if he was imagining things or if something was truly wrong. At first, Raphael dismissed his suspicions as paranoia. Marriage wasn't supposed to feel exciting all the time, was it? They had been together for 10 years, and routines were bound to set in. But the signs were becoming harder to ignore. Elena had started spending more time on her phone, often with a faint smile on her lips that wasn't meant for him. When he walked into the room, she would quickly lock the screen, tucking the phone out of sight. There were also the late nights. Elena had always gone to bed early, worn out from the demands of the day. But recently, she stayed up long after Raphael had fallen asleep. He would wake up in the middle of the night to find her sitting on the couch, her phone glowing softly in the darkness. "What are you doing?" he asked her one night, his voice groggy with sleep. "Just talking to an old friend," she replied casually, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Who?" She hesitated, her fingers stilling on the phone for a moment before she shrugged. "You wouldn't know them. Just someone I reconnected with online." Raphael frowned but didn't press further. He told himself it was nothing, that he trusted her. But trust, he realized, was starting to feel more like a gamble. Elena's behavior continued to change. She began finding reasons to leave the house, errands that suddenly took hours or visits to friends she had never mentioned before. Raphael started noticing how carefully she dressed for these outings, her makeup meticulously applied, her hairstyle just right. One evening, as Elena was getting ready to meet an old friend for coffee, Raphael couldn't hold back his unease. "You've been going out a lot lately," he said, leaning against the doorway of their bedroom. Elena glanced at him through the mirror, her mascara wand poised mid-air. "Is that a problem?" "It's not a problem," Raphael said carefully. "I just don't remember you being this social before." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Maybe I'm just trying to do something for myself for once." The words stung more than Raphael cared to admit. He nodded, stepping back as she grabbed her purse and walked out the door. He watched her car pull out of the driveway, a sinking feeling settling in his chest. Raphael's suspicions reached a breaking point one night in late October. Elena had fallen asleep with her phone on the nightstand. Raphael lay awake beside her, staring at the darkened screen, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't want to invade her privacy. He didn't want to believe that something was wrong. But the questions swirling in his mind refused to be silenced. Carefully, he reached over and picked up the phone. His hands trembled as he unlocked it, using the passcode he had seen her enter countless times. The first thing he saw was a string of messages from a name he didn't recognize, Daniel Cruz. The messages were intimate, filled with terms of endearment that Raphael hadn't heard from Elena in years. "I can't wait to see you, mi alma," one message read. "I wish I could hold you right now," read another. Raphael's stomach churned as he scrolled through the messages. It wasn't just the words, it was the frequency. Daniel's name dominated her inbox, their conversation stretching back for weeks, if not months. When he saw the photos, Daniel's smiling face, his confident posture, his expensive clothes, it felt like a knife to the heart. Raphael clenched the phone tightly, his knuckles turning white. The next morning, Raphael couldn't contain his anger. As soon as Elena woke up, he confronted her. "Who is Daniel?" he asked, his voice low but trembling with barely contained fury. Elena froze, her eyes widening in shock. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," Raphael said, holding up her phone. "I saw the messages. I saw everything." Elena's face crumbled, her defenses faltering. "It's not what you think," she stammered. "Then tell me what it is," Raphael demanded. "Tell me why you've been sneaking around, why you've been lying to me." Tears filled Elena's eyes as she tried to explain. She insisted that it wasn't physical, that she and Daniel had only talked. He made me feel understood," she said, her voice breaking. "He made me feel alive." Raphael's heart ached at her words, but the betrayal was too much to bear. "And I didn't?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena couldn't answer. The argument escalated, years of unspoken frustrations and unmet needs pouring out between them. Raphael felt humiliated, betrayed, and powerless. Elena felt cornered, torn between guilt and a longing she couldn't deny. By the time the confrontation ended, one thing was clear: their marriage would never be the same. The air in the Rivera household was heavy, suffocating even. Days after the confrontation, Raphael's discovery hung between him and Elena like an open wound. Their arguments became more frequent, their words sharper, and the tension between them unbearable. Yet beneath Raphael's anger and hurt was a desperate hope, a belief that their marriage could still be saved. Elena, however, was retreating further into herself. Every time Raphael begged her to talk, to explain, she felt the walls closing in. She told herself she wasn't running away from her family, she was running toward something. Toward the life Daniel had promised her. Meanwhile, Daniel Cruz wasn't waiting patiently. He had grown tired of the secrecy, of their stolen moments through texts and calls. His messages became more urgent, more demanding. "You need to decide, Elena," he wrote one evening. "How much longer are you going to stay trapped in a life that doesn't make you happy?" Elena hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She knew what Daniel wanted: to meet, to finally turn their fantasy into reality. But every time she thought about leaving Raphael, about facing Sophia and Lucas with an explanation she didn't have, the guilt clawed at her. Daniel, sensing her hesitation, pushed harder. "Don't you see? You deserve better. You deserve someone who loves you, who makes you feel alive. That someone is me. But I can't wait forever." His words stirred something deep within her, a mix of longing and fear. Daniel was right. She wasn't happy. She hadn't been for years. The thought of starting over, of leaving the monotony behind, was intoxicating. But at what cost? Raphael, unaware of the messages pouring in from Daniel, was doing everything he could to salvage their relationship. He cancelled late-night meetings, came home earlier, and tried to spend more time with the kids. One night, as Elena tucked Sophia into bed, Raphael lingered in the doorway. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Elena sighed, nodding reluctantly. She followed him downstairs to the living room, where Raphael sat on the couch, his hands clasped tightly together. "I know I've made mistakes," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I know I've taken you for granted. But I love you, Elena. I love our family. And I want to fix this. Whatever it takes." For a moment, Elena felt the weight of his sincerity. She wanted to believe him, to believe that things could go back to the way they were. But then she thought of Daniel, of the way he made her feel. Raphael's love, no matter how genuine, couldn't erase the longing that had taken root in her heart. "I need time," she said finally. Raphael's face fell, but he nodded. "Take all the time you need. Just, don't give up on us." In the days that followed, Elena began to prepare. She told herself it wasn't permanent, that she was simply taking a break to clear her head. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was leaving. She started stashing away money, cash from grocery trips, small amounts Raphael wouldn't notice. She packed a small bag, careful to hide it in the back of her closet. Each step felt surreal, like she was living someone else's life. Daniel's excitement was palpable. "When are you coming?" he asked, his messages becoming more frequent. "I can't wait to see you, to finally be with you." "Soon," Elena replied. They agreed to meet in Laredo, Texas, at a small hotel just outside the city. It was a halfway point, a place where their new life together could begin. Daniel painted a vivid picture of their future, the glamorous life they would build, far from Greenville, far from the responsibilities that weighed her down. But Raphael wasn't as oblivious as Elena thought. He had noticed her growing distance, the way she avoided his touch, the whispers into her phone when she thought no one was listening. One evening, as Elena cooked dinner, Raphael went to their bedroom and opened her closet. His heart sank when he found the bag. Inside were clothes, a passport, and cash, enough to leave and start over. When Elena returned to the room later that night, Raphael was sitting on the edge of the bed, the bag at his feet. "Where are you going, Elena?" he asked, his voice calm but trembling with barely suppressed rage. Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. "It's not what it looks like," she said quickly. "Then tell me what it is," Raphael said, his eyes burning with betrayal. "You're planning to leave, aren't you? To leave me, to leave our family." Tears welled up in Elena's eyes. "I need to figure out who I am, Raphael. I need to find happiness. I can't keep living like this." "Happiness?" Raphael snapped. "You think running off with some stranger is going to make you happy? What about Sophia? What about Lucas? What about us?" Elena looked away, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know," she whispered. The night before she was supposed to leave, Elena tucked Sophia and Lucas into bed, kissing them goodnight with a heaviness in her heart. She told herself she was doing this for them, too, that a happier version of herself would make her a better mother. But as she slipped out of the house in the early hours of the morning, Raphael wasn't far behind. He had seen the messages from Daniel, read the details of their meeting in Laredo. He knew where she was going, and he wasn't going to let her leave without a fight. Driving a few car lengths behind her, Raphael followed Elena down the darkened highway, his mind racing. He didn't know what he would do when he caught up to her. All he knew was that he couldn't let her go. The air was thick with tension as Elena's car pulled into the dimly lit parking lot of a small hotel on the outskirts of Laredo, Texas. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the silence of the early morning. Elena parked her car near the back, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the moment she had been building toward for months. The lies, the secrets, the guilt, they had all led her here. She stepped out of the car, clutching her overnight bag tightly, her breaths shallow and quick. Across the lot, Daniel Cruz leaned casually against his sleek black car, his confident smile lighting up his face when he saw her. His presence was magnetic, drawing Elena forward despite the warning bells ringing in her mind. "You made it," he said warmly, stepping toward her. Elena forced a smile, her voice trembling. "I wasn't sure I would." Daniel cupped her face in his hands, his touch firm yet comforting. "You've made the right choice. From here on, everything changes." But before Elena could respond, the sound of screeching tires broke the moment. She turned sharply, her stomach dropping as Raphael's truck roared into the parking lot. Raphael stepped out of the truck, his expression a volatile mix of anger, heartbreak, and determination. "Elena," he shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet lot. His eyes shifted to Daniel, narrowing with fury. "So this is him?" Elena froze, her bag slipping from her hands. She had never seen Raphael like this before, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "Raphael, she began, but he cut her off. "Save it," Raphael snapped, his gaze locked on Daniel. "You think you can just come in and take my wife? Destroy my family? What kind of man does that?" Daniel straightened, his confident smirk fading into something colder. "The kind of man who sees what someone else is too blind to appreciate," he said coolly. The words hit Raphael like a blow, his hands clenching into fists. "You don't know anything about us," he growled, stepping closer. "Maybe not," Daniel replied, his tone smug. "But I know enough to see she deserves better." Elena's voice trembled as she tried to step between them. "Please, stop this," she pleaded. But neither man was listening. The argument escalated quickly, the tension snapping like a taut wire. Raphael lunged toward Daniel, and the two men grappled in the dim light. Elena screamed, rushing forward to try to pull them apart, but the anger between them was like a storm, unstoppable and destructive. In the chaos, Daniel pulled a knife from his pocket, the blade glinting under the flickering hotel sign. Raphael's eyes widened, but he didn't back down. They struggled, the knife flashing dangerously between them. "Stop it!" Elena cried, her voice breaking. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. One of the men stumbled back, clutching his side as blood seeped through his fingers. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Raphael stood over Daniel, breathing heavily, his shirt torn and his hands trembling. The knife lay on the ground, its blade stained red. Daniel was on the ground, groaning in pain, his bravado completely gone. Elena stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. The flashing lights of police cars painted the parking lot in red and blue as officers arrived at the scene. A hotel employee had called 911 after hearing the commotion. Elena sat on the curb, her head in her hands as an officer asked her questions. She struggled to find the words to explain the unexplainable. Raphael stood nearby, his hands cuffed behind his back, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and regret. He had acted to protect himself, but the damage was done. Daniel was taken to the hospital, his injuries serious but not life-threatening. As the chaos of the night faded, Elena realized the full weight of what had happened. She had torn apart the life she had built, the family she had once cherished, all for a fleeting dream of escape. In the days that followed, the story of the Riveras and Daniel Cruz became a media sensation. Headlines described it as a crime of passion, sensationalizing every detail. Elena returned to Greenville with Sophia and Lucas, but her life was forever changed. Raphael faced legal battles, and their marriage hung in limbo. Daniel disappeared from her life, leaving her to pick up the shattered pieces alone. Elena spent countless nights replaying every decision, every lie, every moment she could have turned back. She had sought freedom, passion, and happiness, but all she found was heartbreak and regret. Do you think Elena made the right choice by pursuing Daniel? Or should she have tried harder to fix her marriage with Raphael? Was Raphael justified in following Elena and confronting Daniel, or did his actions only make things worse? What would you have done if you were in Elena's position? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you feel about this dramatic and heartbreaking story.